Have you ever seen what an indoor environmental assessment looks like in a commercial building or business? During a full assessment, we collect data throughout the building and compare the measurements room to room. We can also collect samples that go to a lab, such as the small cassette shown here, which will be analyzed for types and amounts of mold in the air. We follow up with a physical inspection, looking for moisture sources and using moisture meters to determine if any of your building materials are wet.
I'm James Brierton. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. We are talking the April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse that will be viewable here in the Carolinas and across the United States. Joining me with more from NASA is Gina DiBraccio. She is the Deputy Director of Heliophysics at NASA's GSFC. In 2017, the solar eclipse came to our home turf here in the Carolinas, and we got to see the show in North Carolina and South Carolina. This time around, it's a little bit different. What are some of the differences between this solar eclipse and maybe what people remember from 2017?
So in 2017, the solar eclipse took actually a different path through the US. This time it'll be coming up through Texas, hitting Cleveland, Ohio, and up through Maine. So the path is different, but the width of the path of totality is also a little bit wider than it was in 2017. So the moon is actually going to be traveling just a little bit slower because of where it is in its orbit, and that's going to extend the length of totality to about 4.5 minutes, being the maximum this time, where in 2017 it was somewhere around 2.5 minutes. So totality is going to last a little bit longer if you're in the path of totality. And just where the path is going, there are more cities, and about 31 million people live along the path, which is more than double what happened in 2017.
Going to put on quite a show for a lot of people. Where I am in Charlotte, we're about 80% totality from what I recall, which is lower compared to where we were for that 2017, just to help our audience kind of set expectations.
Yep.
But let me ask you this. In 2017, I remember two things, and you can tell me if I'm misremembering. But obviously the sky darkened. Wildlife. I feel like the birds started chirping. There was some reaction to wildlife as if they thought it was nighttime. Am I remembering that right?
That's right. So that's something that happens during a solar eclipse, and it's pretty amazing. As the moon comes in front of the sun, we get this kind of like dusk feeling where it gets darker, and actually wildlife reacts to that. So the birds will kind of start to chirp and nest for what they think is the night. I remember from my experience, the crickets came out and started chirping as well. And yeah, there's a bunch of kind of wildlife reaction to this. So depending on where you are when you're viewing the eclipse, especially if you're somewhere that's a little more quiet, you might be able to observe that as well.
I also remember having this fear that we had these like thin, wispy clouds that cleared just as the eclipse began. And looking back on it, I go, maybe that was a temperature difference. Is there an atmospheric change that happens during the eclipse?
Yeah, so actually I was in Nashville during the 2017 eclipse, and it sounds like you and I had a very similar experience because the same thing happened for me. Wispy clouds started covering the sun. I got nervous that maybe I would miss that totality, but then they dissipated as the moon covered the sun completely. And yeah, so I mean, what's happening is as the moon is shielding the sun, it's blocking the sunlight and the radiation that's coming to that area of the atmosphere. And so there are direct changes in the atmosphere. You'll feel it start to get cooler. So maybe that's something that you remember as well experiencing is when you were in this area and it gets darker, it got colder. Maybe you felt the winds change a little bit. You notice the clouds change. And actually, NASA does have a participatory science project that people can get involved in to actually report the local temperature and the cloud coverage, and that's called Globe Observer. So people can, regardless of whether you're in that path of totality or in that 80% coverage where the partial eclipse will take place, we want to know what changes in the atmosphere you're experiencing.
That is so cool. I could see our local audience eating that up, and we'll try to put link and information for that in the
Yeah.
description of where people are watching and listening to us. I know NASA is also going to be launching some balloons and doing some experiments inside the path of totality. Can you tell us a little bit about those atmospheric experiments?
Yeah. So we have students launching 750 balloons, I think it is. And basically, what we're doing with that is, or sorry, 75 balloons with 750 students. And so we have different scientific experiments on board to really measure what's going on with the temperature, with the winds, some changes in the atmosphere. Now, some of the other really exciting experiments that we have going on, we have the WB-57 research jet that NASA has, and we have some experiments riding on board there that will follow the path of totality. And it does that so that we can actually extend the length of those experiments in totality. You would think that it would extend a lot longer. It's actually only maybe 2 minutes or so. So we're going from like 4.5 minutes to 6.5, but we'll take as much data as we can get. And those particular experiments are going to be imaging and looking at the corona of the sun, the upper atmosphere, to study kind of how it's being accelerated, how the particles from the sun are accelerated outward, how they're being heated, and really help us to understand that area that we don't get to see on an everyday basis.
That'll be an incredible flight for the people who get to experience that, and every second matters. Let me ask you a little bit more about the corona. Why is it important for us as humans to understand the sun and its impact on our planet?
So, actually, right now, the sun is particularly active. The sun goes through an 11-year activity cycle where the activity picks up and reaches solar maximum and then dips back down to solar minimum. And right now, we're approaching that solar maximum. So, we're getting to see kind of all of this activity, solar flares. You see these bright, energetic bursts coming from the sun, coronal mass ejections that actually throw particles from the sun out into interplanetary space. Now, sometimes they can come towards us at Earth. It can impact our weather, it can have impacts on our communication or our navigation. And so we're interested in studying the sun, and particularly this outer corona where the activity kind of comes from, so that we can better understand it, better predict it, and learn its impacts on us here at Earth.
Our audience may remember there was an AT&T outage not too long ago that there was incorrect speculation that the solar burst or solar storm had caused it. We know now that that wasn't the case, but I guess
Right.
in the worst case scenario, in the most severe of one of these, people could expect maybe GPS interruptions or things of that nature, or maybe even just the northern lights making appearances where they're not supposed to be or not usually are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, right, there can be some hiccups in navigation, communication. We have scientists and others who are working really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. And so, if we're doing our jobs, you won't even know a difference in your everyday lives. But the aurora, the northern lights, are one way to think about the activity of the sun and the energy that it's sending towards the earth. And so, basically, the aurora is created as charged particles come down into the earth's atmosphere and kind of light up the sky. Most of the time we see green, sometimes we can see red, and during particularly active times where the aurora is located can move down kind of to northern, so lower latitudes actually, and others can view it that don't typically see the aurora.
Safety is the utmost importance for people who want to view this show on April 8th. Can you give us some advice for how to properly watch the show while protecting our eyes?
So I have a pair of the solar eclipse viewing glasses right here. This is one of the best ways to view the eclipse. And these are special glasses that are made with a solar filter that allows you to look directly at the sun during the eclipse, only if you're wearing these glasses. And they're so dark that you won't be able to see anything other than the sun. So if you have those, especially since your location is 80% coverage, so you'll always have that partial eclipse. You need to keep those glasses on anytime that you're looking at the sun. If you don't have the glasses, there are other ways to view the eclipse. One way is to get some household items. So if you have a colander handy, you can simply use that and use the little holes in the colander to let the shadow of the sun filter through. If you don't have a colander, you can actually take your fingers and basically cross them together to kind of make a weave of little holes where the sunlight can come through as well. And so there's some at-home ways to do it, but if you have the solar glasses, then that's the best way.
Got a handful of them here that I think I've been hoarding. They're not as old as the last time because I don't think we want to use the ones. Do we? Can we use the ones from 2017 or they've probably expired at this
Yeah,
point?
no, we can
They're
we
good.
can use them. I mean, if you see any obvious kind of like scratches or holes in them, then you definitely do not want to use them. But if they're not damaged, you can use them. And one thing that I think is interesting to think about with these solar eclipse viewing glasses is you can use them to look at the sun when there's not an eclipse going on too.
Oh,
So
good
you
point.
can use them, at any time. And right now with solar activity picking up, sometimes it's fun to just take a look at the sun.
Well, I appreciate your time this morning. Is there anything else you wanted to share with our audience?
Just, take this experience and remember it and remember where you are, because hopefully you'll have another chance to view a solar eclipse in your lifetime. And for me, at least, this will be my second total eclipse, and I'm just excited to compare the differences between those experiences.
Well, I wish you absolute clear skies and the best viewing experience and appreciate your time.
Thank you. You too.
And so you heard it there. You've got options to go out and purchase glasses. You got options to make some glasses at home. You still have some time to try to find these. They're going to get scarce if you're going to buy them. So we do have some links in the description where you can go and buy these while supplies last. If you're looking locally, think about places you may not expect to find them. I have been able to find solar eclipse glasses in the past in hardware stores, in video production stores, and of course you could check with your local library or local science museum to find out if they have any glasses on hand. Again, April 8th is the date, about 3:11 in the afternoon, give or take a few minutes, depending on exactly where you are in the Carolinas. And we're about 70 to 80% totality with this one. So we're not in the path of totality like we were the last time, but it's still going to be a great show and a great opportunity for you, the kids, and everyone to get involved. Go ahead and get those glasses secured now so you are all set for April 8th. We're looking forward to it. Thank you for joining me for this edition of the Carolina Weather Group. I'm James Brierton. Stay subscribed, and we'll see you again back here real soon.